of the Special Education Advisory Committee of the Halton District School Board for Tuesday, December 1st, 2020. Given the need to practice social distancing due to COVID-19 pandemic, we are holding this meeting remotely through a video conference. And just to remind you that this meeting is being recorded. Before we begin with the roll call, I will let Trustee Oliver provide us with an update. Trustee Oliver?
Okay, thank you, and good evening, everybody. I have an update with respect to changes in representative status. The Learning Disabilities Association of Halton Hamilton has informed the Superintendent of Student Services and the Chair of SEAC that they would like their SEAC members, Alison Brindle and Diane Vandenbosch, to switch positions as representative and alternate on HDSB SEAC, pending approval of the board. At a special meeting of the board on November 30th, Superintendent Zonneveld brought forward Report 2136 regarding this request from LDAHH, and this change in status was approved by trustees. So Alison Brindle is now the representative for LDAHH, and Diane Vandenbosch assumes the role of the alternate. Welcome, Alison and Diane, to your new roles, and thank you for your continued commitment and represent Special Education Advisory Committee. And now over, I don't know if Melissa Dockery is with us yet. I have not seen her name pop up. Melissa, are you online? Okay, the Easter Seal Society had informed Superintendent Zonneveld and the Chair of SEAC that they would like to add a new representative for their association in the capacity of an alternate member, and that is Sarah Lensley. And welcome, Sarah. I'm not sure if she has joined us yet.
Yeah, she's here.
Okay. Oh,
hi.
Sarah.
Hi, thank you.
Welcome.
Thanks.
All right, over to you, Lou.
Okay. So I am now going to ask for a roll call to record who is in attendance. Joanna?
Okay, so just a reminder, if everybody could keep their mics off and come on when your name is called and let us know that you are present. Starting with association reps, Association for Bright Children, Deidre Wu.
Hi there, I'm here.
Hi, and alternate Heddle Shaw. I don't see Heddle. For Autism Ontario, Lisa Cameron.
Present.
Oh, great. Hi, Lisa. Easter Seals, we have Sarah with us, and Melissa. Was Melissa able to join? No. Okay, so Sarah. For Halton Down Syndrome Association, Sophia Siddiqui. Mike Brown. Is Mike online?
He's absent tonight, Joanna.
Oh, right. Okay. He sent his regrets. Sorry, I forgot about that. Okay, Learning Disabilities, Alison Brindle.
Present.
Great. And Diane Vandenbosch. Oh. For Voice, Judy Shields. Okay. Moving on to members at large, James Baldwin.
Present.
Hi, James. Diane Miller sent regrets. And Lucille Morris is with us. And for trustees, Margot Shuttleworth.
I am here.
Hi, Margot. Tracy L. Harrison.
Hi, everyone. I'm here. Nice to see you.
Yeah. And Heather Garretts.
Good evening, everyone. Nice to see you all.
Hi, Heather. All right. And we have Superintendent Mark Zonneveld, who is the Superintendent of Student Services. And we've got Administrator of Student Services, Lorna Goodrow. And I see Sean Marks. And anybody, okay, and I'll let you, Mark, introduce the rest of the staff. Do you
Sure,
want to
thanks.
wait for the presentation?
Yeah, so we also have Rebecca Newcomb, who's our Vice Principal in Student Services here as well. And then our first agenda item, I can introduce those staff now. We have Tina Salmini, our Superintendent of School Programs Elementary, is with us. Also Lori Reed, our Principal of Elementary Program, and Jennifer Chamberlain, who is one of our instructional program leaders in school programs. Also part of that presentation, Sean Marks, who's already been introduced, is the Principal of Special Education Student Services. And also Christine Howard is here, one of our managers in Student Services, who supervises our speech language pathologist. And I think that's all of our staff on tonight. Thanks, Joanna.
Thank you, Mark. We will begin by honoring the land, and I will ask that Joanna does the land acknowledgement for this meeting.
Okay. Halton, as we know it today, is rich in history and modern traditions of many First Nations and the Métis. From the Anishinaabe to the Arawandron, the Haudenosaunee, and the Métis, these lands surrounding the Great Lakes are steeped in Indigenous history. As we gather today on these treaty lands, we have the responsibility to honor and respect the four directions: land, waters, plants, animals, ancestors that walked before us, and all the wonderful elements of creation that exist. We would like to acknowledge and thank the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation for sharing their traditional territory with us.
Thank you, Joanna. We now need to approve the agenda for tonight's meeting. So I'm looking for someone to move a motion to approve the agenda. Margot? And a seconder?
I will,
Alison. Thank you. Next up is the approval of our November 3rd meeting minutes. Are there any errors and omissions? And if you wish to speak to the agenda, please indicate so in the chat box. Okay, I'm going to ask somebody to move to approve the minutes.
I move that we approve.
Thank you, and I'm looking for a seconder. Margot, could I ask you to second? Okay. We are now up to the action items, and our presentation tonight is about the early years assessment and supports with staff from the school programs and student services presenting. I will ask Mark to please introduce our presenters.
Thanks, Lou. So this has been an item on our list of topics that we wanted to hear about at SEAC for a while now. And so I appreciate your patience with this. We asked if you could hold off in the past because we had some challenges last year, you knew, with our labor disruption, which made it difficult for staff to participate. And then we had COVID. So we finally been able to pull this together, and I'm looking forward to a great presentation for you tonight. So we're going to start with our school programs staff, with Tina and Lori and Jennifer talking about the assessments and supports that we provide for students in the early years for all students. So this is the kind of programming and structures that you'll see across our early years classes. My early years typically mean K-3. So you'll see that. So this might be a little bit younger than grade 3, what you're hearing tonight, but that's the first level of supports and assessments that you'll hear about. And so I think after they've presented, we're going to pause there for a moment and take any questions of clarification at that point. So you know that we're going to move into breakout rooms afterwards, which will give people the chance to really dig in with other kinds of questions. But just if you have questions of things that you would like to better understand that you heard in the presentation, we'll pause for that. Then we'll move on, and Christine Howard will present more specifically some of the things that we're doing in the early years from a student services standpoint for students with special needs. And she'll talk about some of our programs and the other types of things and services that are provided. And then we'll take again questions of clarification, and then we'll move into our breakout groups after that. Okay, so I think, Jen, are you going to be sharing the slide deck? So as we're used to before, if you want to be able to see the slides that much more bigger on your screen, if you go to the bottom 3 dots on the right of your screen and pop up to change layout, and if you either choose Spotlight, where you will only get the slide deck showing, or if you go to Sidebar, you'll see the speaker and the slide deck. So either of those will make the slide deck larger for you. And if I haven't missed anything, I think I'll hand it over to Tina to start.
Good evening, everyone. I just wanted to say thank you for having us. We're excited about sharing this information with you tonight and spending some time answering questions and speaking to you in the breakout groups as well. And I want to thank the staff from my department in particular, Lori and Jen, for all the work they've done to prepare the presentation and for doing the bulk of the work tonight. But certainly I'm here to help with any of the questions that come afterwards. So I am going to turn it over to Lori to begin.
Great, thank you, Tina, and it's a pleasure to be here with you this evening. We are happy to have this opportunity to speak with you about phonemic awareness, teaching, learning, and the assessment practices in K-2 classrooms. As you know, phonemic awareness is an important part of reading development, and we certainly want our students to be able to think about phonemes in sounds and in words. And they can take this knowledge and understanding and apply it to their skills in reading and writing. Additionally, a strong phonological, those strong phonological processing skills are really very well known to be linked to skillful reading and writing. And recognizing that this has important implications on instruction and assessment in the early years and beyond, we'd like to take you through some of the different processes that we have in place in our system. And of course, it certainly is an example of teaching that is necessary for some, but really it's good for everyone. Everyone can benefit from learning the strategies that are in support of strong phonemic awareness and strong phonological processing skills. So our approach really recognizes that it's an essential foundation. It's a building block, and it really is a requirement or an essential component in learning how to read and write. We strive to make this importance evident in our classrooms, and as such, we have a proactive and a preventative model. So phonemic awareness is supported, assessed, it's tracked on an ongoing basis throughout the early years. Today, our plan is to share some examples of what it looks like in Tier 1 instruction in typical classrooms across the district. We'll look at some of the tools that our educators are using to monitor, and then we're going to discuss what happens when it becomes evident that some additional support might be needed. So we are going to share with you today some of the ways that educators measure and track phonological awareness development in those K-2 classrooms. And of course, Mark sort of talked about the grade 3 classroom, and it is certainly sort of a flexible line. We'll focus on sort of the earlier years, but it certainly does fluidly move into that latter part of the primary division. We'll look at some of the tools that they have and that they use regularly and effectively to measure and to track. And we'll look at how phonological awareness is really taught and supported, and then sort of go through how this is really rooted in the assessment data that is gathered. So although these are we won't be covering everything with you this evening. We will give you a fairly high-level overview, and that will sort of include the how, what the responsive teaching and learning looks like, and then we'll focus back in on those situations where increasingly intensive support is required. So what I'm going to do is turn it over to Jen, and then I'm going to come back to you towards the last few slides. And of course, if there's any questions along the way, we'd be more than happy to answer them.
Thanks, Lori. Exactly like Lori said, tonight we'll just look at the assessment practices and tools that educators use to support phonological awareness, and as well from those assessments, some of the responsive teaching and learning moves that they do in everyday classroom life. And what we hope to do is paint a picture for you, because due to the oral nature of phonological and phonemic awareness work, it's hard to send that home in a backpack. So we've tried to paint a picture here tonight of some of those things and make that visible to you all. So we'll dive into the assessment practices. Sorry, I'm getting invited into a breakout room too soon. So looking at some of the general classroom assessment practices, we really look at in the early years, and as growing success dictates, we look at assessing through observations, conversation, and also assessing products that students create. So generally, what that looks like is educators making observational notes during the teaching and learning throughout their program, and then using the process of pedagogical documentation. So that means, having those documents and documentation of student work and learning, and then stopping and analyzing what they're seeing and saying, what does this mean for the student based on that educator's understanding of the developmental nature of phonological awareness. And then most importantly, what implications does that have for instruction, and how will this inform my planning and my teaching and teaching planning and moves. And throughout the early years, we do that. So that's the first side of this, that classroom documentation piece is everyday kind of practice. And then the other side is that educators have at their disposal more formal classroom assessments. And those would be coming into play based on educators' professional judgment and as needed based on their initial observations of students. So we'll dive into a few of those specifics. But before that, we wanted to show you an example of how an educator might use even a product to learn a little bit or to understand how a student is doing in the area of phonological processing. So here we have a student, what they meant to write is, I'm making a star. And in this example, you can see that even in a written product, it gives us a little bit of a clue about what that student knows and can do in terms of phonological awareness. So here we can see that the student can accurately segment some sounds or phonemes, and they can match those phonemes to letter sounds. And then the educator might also notice making, the student says make, and they might want to check on that student's ability to hear and segment at the syllable level. And this particular example would also indicate some support is needed in terms of mapping sounds to print correctly, which is not necessarily our focus tonight, but it just kind of speaks to that integrated nature of assessment. And then, of course, like I mentioned, it's all about the next steps to support that student. So in this lesson, or in this example, an educator might plan if they notice that many students in the class have the same learning need, they might do a whole class or a small group mini lesson on segmenting syllables. They might explicitly teach some letter sounds like S and T, because it looks like those aren't in place yet. And depending on how developed the student is, maybe providing some ways for the student to practice and consolidate their learning later on during independent time. So just an example, I know we generally don't talk about products because it's mostly that oral nature, but we thought this one might work. And we also wanted to show you an everyday tool that we use in our system, and we do recommend this one is used for all students in the early years who are at that really emergent stage of literacy development. And it's called the Wheel of Emergent Reading Behaviors. And what they do is based on their ongoing observations of students, they would check off or highlight what skills students have as they happen. So I know it's a little bit small to see, but the left side there is phonological awareness. And there's things like, can the student hear the initial sound in a word? Can the student identify and hear the medial sound, ending sound? Can they segment a word to write? So all of those indicators are marked here. And so this, like I said, we do promote the use of this one in particular because we don't want to wait and not track at all. And then notice later on that students are perhaps lagging in this area. We want to be having this proactive approach and monitoring it for all students, and then of course going deeper as needed. And speaking of going deeper, here's another example that an educator might use. This is a tool from our actually our ministry document, which is the Guide to Effective Reading Instruction K-3, and it's the Phonemic Awareness Inventory. And so educators might not need to do this for all students, but based on, it is a formal assessment that they might use. And this particular one, lets educators know what students can do at the phoneme level, not the phonological awareness level, just at the phoneme level. And then of course they would use that to plan activities to move that student forward. So this one we particularly like because it even separates it into developing and not yet developed. And that way, you know, if a student's at that developing level, then we know that it's happening somewhat and we need to provide opportunities for practice and consolidation, versus at that not yet developed, then we know our approach needs to be a little bit different, and that will probably call for some explicit teaching and modeling first. So having those different levels of development is helpful. So like I said, we have many other specific tools, and they're listed in that earlier slide, but we won't go into all of them in detail tonight just for the sake of time, but that's just two of them. What we really also wanted to show you was what happens after the assessment. So when educators know that they have gathered their assessment data, how do they use that in order to teach responsibly, whether that's in a comprehensive literacy program in grades 1 and on, or through the kindergarten program. So what we've got here is a whole bunch of examples from Halton classrooms. One picture is not, I couldn't find a picture that showed it, but every other one is from Halton classrooms. And what they are is pictures of educators using routines, shared reading, interactive writing, and guided and independence practice. So those are all components of the routines plus components of comprehensive literacy. And we just thought we would shine a spotlight on how phonological and phonemic awareness is developed and assessed through those teaching and learning activities. And of course, it's important to note that these are usually flexible based on assessment data and other student needs, and that they might include explicit instruction or opportunities for practice. So we'll dive into those. This one is, it's hard to see in the picture here, but this is an example of one of the opportunities that classroom educators provide through routines. We know that phonological awareness is actually best supported through really short, purposeful work. And so often teachers and educators will embed it right through their day. So for example, they might give students opportunities to blend sounds through their routines. Like they might say, "Jack, come pick up your coat." Or maybe if a student was a little bit more developed in this area, they might say, "Jack, come and pick up your coat." So just like on the fly. And like I said, that's what's really hard to show you. But we do have a picture here. And this is the educator had asked students to make a plan for their learning for that day. And even just that invented spelling gives students a chance to listen really carefully to sounds and words and to record them. And so that's a way to practice phonological awareness, even when the educator isn't necessarily with them one-on-one. So routines is one way, and then the other ones are a little bit more formal. One of those is through a context of shared reading. So in shared reading, we sometimes do it whole class, we sometimes do it in a small class context based on the purpose, but always based on observation data. And certainly through shared reading, we support phonological awareness and so much more. It shows students how to access grade level texts, fosters that love of reading. Students understand more about different text forms and formats. It's really helpful for developing vocabulary, which we know is another, and content knowledge, which we know are both building blocks of literacy as well. It provides opportunities for that systematic and explicit teaching of phonics through connected text and through for modeling fluent reading. So a whole bunch of benefits of shared reading, but certainly educators can have the learning goal of phonological awareness. So for example, they might, in this text here, they might ask students to say the word neck and ask the students to say it really slowly and identify the first letter that they might see based on that first letter sound. Or they might use magnetic letters to help students create and through sounds. So for this one, I think it's has. So you might have students each having their own whiteboard and giving them those 3 letters and having them move the letters and say as they create that. So we do think when it's connected to text, it's more meaningful and sticks more. So that's just an example of embedding these skills in a text. Here's another example of shared reading and through poetry, because it's just such a great way to help students play with language and respond to it and notice the features of spoken language and how language works. So we know that the more awareness they have of the phonological system, the easier it is to map those sounds to print later. So in this example, an educator might have students snap or clap each time they hear a word that rhymes or generate other rhyming words. They might use magnetic letters to break rhyming words and to onset and rhyme, or play with the phonemes when they're ready. So that's just an example of that. And that, again, could be whole class or small group. And then we do have quite a few examples of supporting phonemic awareness through small group instruction, because due to the wide range of ages and stages, and especially in the kindergarten program, sometimes we have students between 3 and 6 in the same classroom, and that makes sense that they would be at varying stages of development in this area. And even when you think about phonological awareness itself, we're looking at segmenting, blending, deleting, substitute, and then the different levels of complexity. Are we doing that at the word level, a syllable level, onset and rhyme level, at the phoneme level? So it makes a whole lot of sense that students would have very differing needs. So we find that working in the small group format allows us to differentiate our instruction and give students exactly what they need at that next developmental level. And we've got an example here. This is an educator. We call these sound tubs, and essentially they're objects like little toys that start with a letter, of course. And what the educator might do is take 2 different letters, dump them out, and then ask students to listen to the sounds to she might ask them to help sort them back into the bins for, I don't know what those ones are, T and R maybe, based on the sound that they hear. Or the educator might use them as a visual support, and she might say, who can find me the dog? So having students blend at the phoneme level. So it's just another way. Here's another example. We've got here, the one on the left is an example of how we support students to hear phonemes orally, just with this visual support of an L-Conan box. And especially we know that they often don't hear those medial vowels very well. So using that tactile, by pushing those gems in as they say a sound, is helpful. And the one on the right, manipulating middle sounds. So these are examples of the kind of work that might be done in a small group. And I think we have one more. Yeah, here's one. It may be hard to see as well, but what I like about this example is it's called interactive writing as a strategy, and it's an opportunity for students to make connections between oral language and writing and reading. And usually during this, not this year, they would share the pen, the educator and the students would share the pen back and forth, working toward goals of whatever the students' goals are within their zone of proximal development. And through this strategy, basically the educators are supporting letter sound knowledge by encoding, forming letters, composing sentences and messages, and also the reading process as they go back and read what they wrote. So in this example here, the educator is supporting oral language and teaching students at that just right level. And you can see the one on the right, it says, if you can see it, it says spare bedroom. And you can tell that the student wrote some of it and the educator wrote the rest. And so that's supporting the student just where they are and just for the sounds that they need to hear next. So on this one, the student had actually been able to hear the first part of bed, but they didn't get room. So you can see, you might be able to see that the educator wrote room for them. So kind of just pushing them where we're at that level. And then in the middle one, you can see a sound box used, and this student is really at the emergent level of literacy, and you might be able to tell that the student was able to hear and record the first sound of a of a word, and then the educator wrote the rest. So it's kind of cool because it's a strategy where even within the same group and the same activity, a student can still be a teacher can still be flexible and meet diverse student needs right in the same context. So that's a favorite strategy of mine. And this one, probably not something we talk about a lot, but I mentioned it earlier that even asking students to write independently is an exercise in phonological awareness, and we only have one or a maximum 2 educators in the room, and so we're always looking for ways, meaningful ways, to support students in their practice and consolidation of skills when this teacher can't be with them, so in a small group or whole group. So this is an example of a student being asked to write and then giving them that chance to independently practice. And of course, there are supports to do that, like stacks of Elkonin boxes to help them move to that next level, even during independent work. And lastly, we heard that some folks had heard from others that there was concerns about how students were being supported in this 2020-2021 school context. So we thought we would show you a few things here. The first kind of 3, the ones that are not photos, those ones are digital templates that our program department has created for educators to support them in digitizing some of this work with students. So you can see that first one is segmenting using phonemes and sound boxes and matching those to letters to write. The next one is an activity, just an oral language activity, counting the phonemes in a word and then sliding using Elkonin boxes. You can't see it there, but later on they would use Elkonin boxes to identify those sounds even more explicitly and then perhaps write letters to match. We've got a rhyming one there. And then the last photo there is just an example of a classroom that is following the direction of the HDSB Reopening Schools plan and how the educator and that student are still doing this work, but in safe ways. And with that, I think I will pass it back over to Lori.
Unmute. Thanks, Jen. That's great. So as we continue to implement these strategies in the classroom and we work with students and we document on a daily basis and we create the next step for children based on where they're at and what they need next, there are times when increasingly intensive support may be required. So where that becomes the case, we start to look at various physical as well as human resources that could become beneficial in deepening the support if someone, if students require something additional. We do have in our system our LRT teachers who are delivering a program called Leveled Literacy Intervention, which is really designed to as an intervention tool. And it is something that we use when we are really supporting students who may be struggling and not quite where they need to be yet at the grade 1 level. So our LRT teachers certainly do provide that additional intensive support. Further, we call on the various resources in our building, depending on the needs of that particular child, that individual student's needs. So that might include, another person coming in and having a look, maybe working with a small group or with the student in the classroom. At times we consult with our special education resource teachers. There may be times when we call in our ESL teacher because it could be a student who may be struggling as a result of English not being their first language. So there's a variety of tools that we utilize in order to ensure that our students and our children in our classrooms are accessing all possible resources. We would, of course, then when there was a concern or when all of the things we were trying weren't really, yielding the results that we wanted, or we had a concern, then we would, of course, bring that to our school team for brainstorming, and probably a lot of our resource people will be there and be in contact with family, of course, and then move forward potentially with next steps like an SRT. So we always work together in terms of the problem-solving steps that we take, and our primary, of course, goal is always to meet the needs of each learner wherever they might be at any given time. I'm wondering if there's any questions at this time, or if we can pause for any clarifications that might need to be met.
just, we can't necessarily see your hand, so please speak up if you've got a question, anyone. Any clarification you need on what you heard, saw? Going once, going twice. Okay, no questions at this time. Thank you. Let's carry on. And I think, Jen, you're going to work the slides. Is that right? And Christine is going to pick up where you left off.
So I was going to speak specifically to the role of speech and language and how we've decided to align some of the early intervention and prevention supports in the board. But in addition to the speech and language pathologists who are involved in the early years, of course, we also have our behavior analysts and often our CYCs who are involved in some of the problem solving and support for some of our kids in the early years as well. But specifically, this presentation seemed like it was concentrating more around the literacy aspects of things. And so we thought I'd concentrated primarily on the speech and language pathology role within this. So obviously there are 19 SLPs within our board and 2 assigned specifically to the assistive technology team to provide supports in sort of augmentative and alternative communication and technology. But we in speech and language, 80% of the focus is in the early primary grades. So that's specifically the focus of this presentation. So sort of JK to grade 2, grade 3, because we do have a strong belief in early intervention and prevention. And the assessments for students with in junior kindergarten to grade 2 do focus on assessments. However, speech and language pathologists, a lot of their value is actually beyond what they do beyond assessments. So the assessment is one component that they provide, but then they also provide a lot of intervention, consultation, recommendations, and programming suggestions. They're involved heavily in IEP and program consultation. We certainly do provide support to complex needs students from JK all along the continuum up to age 21. Obviously, we participate in SRTs, and really good SRTs are ones that really focus on problem solving to support students. We do work in a multidisciplinary fashion with other PSSP. We provide consultation and referrals, and we work collaboratively with other outside agencies. And last year, we did provide quite a high number, so 4,129 students received services from the 19 SLPs in the board. In addition, we also provide weekly or biweekly support to 5 alpha classes, which are the grade 1 speech and language classes, 6 kindergarten programs, 14 communication programs, and 34 life skills and CPPs.
Christine.
Yes.
Sorry, hi, it's Margot here. I'm just wondering, could you, I know because not everyone is necessarily familiar with all of the acronyms, could you spell some of them out for some of the members?
Sorry, I thought I don't even recognize I'm using them. So which ones specifically?
So I'm just thinking, so you rattled off quite a few. So I know like speech and language pathologists, SLP, but if you could just try and, when you're using them, explain, because I know that there will be some people here who won't necessarily know what they all mean.
Sure. Yes, I'm sorry where I was using any of them. No, absolutely. So let me move on to the next slide.
Sorry to break your flow.
No, that's okay. I think I'm using the acronym and then spelling it out ahead of time, so I apologize for if that's not what's happening. Jen, if you could change to the next slide.
I think maybe we've lost Jen.
No, I'm here. Is it not changing for you? I'm already on the kelp slide. Is it not showing up? Okay, let me just stop sharing and try again. And I don't know why it's timed out there. Just a sec.
Christine, in the meantime, I have a question for you. You mentioned there were over 4,000 consultations.
So tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 support. So for us, that would be whole class support. That's our support to our self-contained classes. That is tier 2, which would be small group support, and also tier 3, which would include individual assessments for students.
And those are all unique consultations.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Are we good now? Are we seeing the oral language slide?
Yes.
Great.
Yep. So this is kind of the foundation of obviously speech and language, and why speech and language support, especially in the early grades, because oral language is the foundation for everything that we do, including the basis for literacy support. And there is that reciprocal relationship between oral language as well as reading and writing, which is why we would obviously introduce book reading to students and to even to infants, because there's all kinds of oral language and that gets used, and then children with poor oral language do poorly at understanding literacy, and then students who are also not exposed to higher levels of literature also then suffer in their oral language because they're not able to continue to develop their content, their vocabulary, and their complex language structures. So it's important that while students are learning to read and to decode for themselves, that they continue to be exposed to that richer literacy model. When we looked at intervention, specifically where we can focus, we're quite aware that there's quite a number of students who really struggle in the later grades. And so we thought, what is it that we can do in those earlier grades to really intervene with those kids that are demonstrating to us that they have needs? I don't know if how many of you are aware, we did change we used to have a grade 1-2 program called the primary language class. We made a very purposeful change in looking at that change in that support and having it go earlier. So we put a kindergarten program in place. It's a little similar to what there was an old program in place several years ago, 6 years ago maybe, called the Early Language Development Center. But while this one is similar, it has some differences as well. So we specifically wanted to take a look at it being an expressive language, so an oral language program, and then that early literacy program. And really there's a very heavy focus on phonological awareness development in those classes, which again, as Jen was alluding to, is quite oral in nature. And that's why speech and language pathologists have been very heavily involved in phonological awareness, because it is an oral language bridge between oral language and developing reading and writing. So the Kindergarten Expressive Language and Literacy Program, KELP, is a language and literacy program for year 2 kindergarten students. It's a heavy focus on oral language, phonological and phonemic awareness, literacy abilities within the framework of the kindergarten program. So it has a KELP teacher and speech and language pathologist who work collaboratively to individualize programming. It is supported by a partnership with the Student Services IPL. There are 2 sessions per year and then 2 classes running simultaneously within those 2 blocks. So from September to January, there's 2 groups of students, and then there's another group of students that run February to June. This year, because of COVID, it's actually running on an alternate week program. So the students continue to attend their homeschool on the alternate weeks. It is offered in each of the 3 areas of the Halton District School Board. The class size is a maximum of 10 students, and transportation is provided. For the profile of the students in KELP, they really are the students who are demonstrating those expressive language delays for a variety of reasons, and then are also demonstrating phonological awareness difficulties, which obviously we know that children who have oral language delays are at significant risk for developing literacy challenges. And also the research tells us that a majority of students that get identified eventually with a learning disability profile are suffering in that phonological processing area. And so that's why we've really chosen to focus rather than wait, because we know these students are going to be at risk to really support that development in the kindergarten program. And then from a receptive, so their comprehension, in the kindergarten program, we do allow them to have some comprehension challenges. And we also take a look at first language for students who are ELL. We do take a look at their first language development, because that's usually an indicator of second language challenges. They may or may not also have some difficulty, obviously, with their speech. But overall, we're looking for students who are ready to access the program, because it is only half-time for 5 months. We're obviously looking for students who, some of them do have some social and behavioral challenges, but not extreme ones such that they can't benefit or that are going to detract from the program. So they're identified by a speech and language pathologist and go through SRT for parent support and school decision. So as you can see here, this is just an example of some of the phonological awareness activities that the teachers would do with the students in the class. So this is using segmenting of compound words so that students understand that you can break whole words into smaller parts, but not at the individual sound level yet, so that they're learning that you can manipulate the language without, it has really very little to do with the meaning. It's all oral, but it is easier for students at the beginning to use compound words because each of those syllables then does have its own meaning. But that's one example of an activity to develop phonological awareness, and this would be another one. So once students have gone past the compound a word level, then they would also learn how to, again, before they start blending those individual sounds, they learn how to blend individual parts of words which are more than one sound, like syllables. And then again, here's another example of rhyme awareness. So the students are letting us know whether they know, again, not related to the meanings of the words, but just the sounds of the words themselves, whether these words rhyme. And then if, again, like I was saying, we always have to also support, as we're developing phonological phonemic awareness and the students' decoding and encoding abilities, we still have to maintain that rich vocabulary by exposing them to books and to talking about multiplicity of words and synonyms, antonyms, things like that. So some of that would be done via good read alouds and developing that vocabulary, but it's also done through some of our activities where we're really developing that oral language component for the students. The expressive language and phonological awareness class, which we call our alpha class, the profiles of the students are quite similar, but again, we did make a conscious choice to change it away from the primary language class into being very explicit about the fact that in that class, the focus really is on expressive language and phonological awareness. We know that a lot of our students actually do start in KELP and then need to move also back into our alpha class. So what we're hoping is that the KELP class will be able to take the students quite far down the phonological awareness continuum, and that the alpha class can then pick up more towards the end of that phonological awareness continuum into the phonemic awareness continuum, and then continue that encoding and decoding process. And also we start focusing a lot more on syllable types. So there's a variety of ways to teach kids to read, but we are really focusing on decodable texts, and we're really focusing on syllable types. And a couple of the syllable types we would focus on in that class are the closed syllable types, and then those magic E, so like the difference between cap and cape, where the E on the end, the silent E, then changes the vowel sound. So we would do a lot of focus on that in that class. But then also we still have the focus, just like we do have in the alpha class, or in the KELP class, sorry, around teaching the oral language, and again, concentration on phonological and phonemic awareness, the reading, the decoding, the writing, the encoding. And again, because it's in a grade 1 class, is the grade 1 curriculum that is the framework, although we've made a particular emphasis on the literacy and numeracy strands. And again, it is similar. It's offered in all 3 areas of the board. It's 10 students. It's a partnership between the alpha teachers and the speech and language pathologists, again, supported by a partnership with the Student Services IPL, heavily partners with us around providing PD and meeting with the teachers. It runs the entire school year, so it's 1 full school year. It is only grade 1. Again, a maximum of 10 students, and transportation is provided.
Can I ask a question?
Of course.
Okay, I have 2 questions actually. So the kindergarten program, you said it was a part-time program?
Yes.
So the other part-time, are they in their community kindergarten class?
They are, yes.
And with the Alpha program, it is a self-contained class, or is it in partnership with a community classroom?
No, it's a self-contained class, and the students are placed in there via SRT and then IPRC.
Okay, thank you.
So again, the profile of the students for Alpha, sorry, Jen, if you can, slide back one. The profile of the students is slightly different in that for the students in the Alpha program, we actually are looking for them to have average comprehension. Because they only have 1 year in the program and we're looking for them to make quite a lot of gains, especially reading and writing. Is going into the Alpha class, we are asking for them to have average comprehension skills. And again, we've taken a look at the assessments to not disadvantage our students who have ELL. So we have slightly different criteria for our ELL students to look at their comprehension skills, but we are asking for average comprehension skills, obviously delayed oral language skills. That's the basis for their identification at IPRC. That delay in reading, phonological phonemic awareness, and then also the ability to access the class. So again, we do have children in there who have, some behavioral challenges, some self-regulation challenges, social challenges, but not so distracting that they are not able to benefit from the class or that they are detracting from the learning of the other students in that program. We have 5 Alpha classes across the board that each have 10 students in them. And we have 3 KELP classes, 1 in each area. However, they are running, like I say, 2 classes at the same time. So it's the equivalent of 6 kindergarten classes. So at the end of the year, 50 children go through the Alpha class and 120, up to 120 students go through the KELP program in a year. We can change slides, Jen. So again, here's an example too. So this is sort of later developing some phonological awareness things. So here's where the students are identifying the first sound and then the last sound. Sometimes we call them head sounds or tail sounds or beginning sounds and chop-off sounds. And we're typically are using a multi-sensory approach to teaching the students their letters and sounds. So we're using visual. We are teaching printing in those classes. We're teaching them actions to go with it, and we're using many visuals, and we're obviously using some technology in there as well. So we're trying to teach the kids to remember in whatever way possible, because yes, again, some of these students do have some processing challenges and they have some memory challenges. So we're using a lot of a multiplicity of ways to teach the skills. Here's another example. So again, we're encouraging the children here to use invented spelling. So not phonics, which is where the phonological awareness or the phonemic awareness comes into the rules. In this case, we're specifically asking for the children to sound it out just using the individual sounds in the word. So for example, you can see the little ghost on the top right-hand corner. So that sound, if you can step away from the spelling of that word, which has 5 letters in it, that sound in effect only has 4 sounds, just the good, the ah, the s, and the t. And so the students would be encouraged to use the alphabetic principle to match each of those sounds that they hear to a letter. And then again, a very heavy emphasis on oral intervention in the class as well, via read alouds and also via a lot of oral activities in the class, because all the students coming into the program do have oral language deficits. When we looked at resources to put into the KELP and Alpha classes, we also wanted to align it with some of the work that's going on in the structured reading project. So we have certainly had a strong emphasis, obviously, on providing materials for the teachers that will help develop that phonological awareness, the decodable texts via Flyleaf, some of the materials of the Wilson Foundation's program, Story Champs, which is an oral narrative development program. And then just this year, we provided the teachers with David Kilpatrick's book around the Assessing, Preventing, and Overcoming Reading Difficulties, which is the pedagogical fit for reading success, which at least half of that book, I would say, it has intervention activities embedded in it. So we really have tried to align the materials we provided in there with what we know is good research and science based on what we know the students who are at risk for, or some of them do develop not yet diagnosed, and what also is happening with the struggle involved in. So we've really tried to align it as an early intervention and prevention program for those students who potentially will be identified as having learning disabilities. And not that we're going to prevent necessarily the identification of a learning disability, but if we can get those kids reading, then we can help them to be independent and to be functioning at grade level with their reading and using their own good literacy skills to be able to help themselves develop and stay on track in terms of their curriculum and stuff.
Thanks, Christine. So any questions? Deirdre, go ahead.
Hi there. Thank you. This is so much wonderful information about the program. I'm curious to know when children are in JK and SK, is it related to parents coming forward or teachers being involved in starting the process of presenting some of these difficulties to the schools and to the SRT teams? How does one get started with that process with you guys?
Right, so it's a variety of ways that, so it can either come from parent concern, it can come from schools concern, so academic. It can also come from a family history. So sometimes we're noticing that this is a sibling of another student who's had some of the same kinds of developmental concerns. They're noticing a similar pathway. And the other way that it can happen is if a student has accessed the preschool speech and language service through AirNote Kids, they send us a discharge report and an assessment report. So the SLPs, the speech and language pathology, they read through those to see if this is identified prior to coming to school. We wouldn't wait for the school to identify that. We would identify that to school as a potential concern. Again, we only start seeing funding for junior kindergarten actually resides with the preschool services. So we start seeing those kids sort of March of their JK year, their year 1 K year, to identify them as potential candidates for the KELP program in September of their year 2, and to obviously make referrals for school-based rehab services, unless they're complex needs kids. So if there are kids who are either nonverbal or have ASD, those students we would consult on right away in September, October to help set IEP goals for certs. So it can come through a variety of processes, either educator concern, so teacher, ECE, EA. It can come through parent concern. It can come through, like I say, history, sibling history, and or the preschool speech and language reports being shared with us. Or private, if the parents are accessing private services as well.
And just as a follow-up, obviously you have limitations to your classes. What happens when there are more children? It must be very difficult, obviously, to choose who falls in line with the programming. Do you have specific grade levels that you're dealing with here? How do you choose those specific kind of borderline?
Right, so the children who wouldn't meet communication program, which I didn't talk about specifically, that's for students sort of year 2K up to grade 4, who are developing functional communication skills. So they tend to be more of our complex needs students. A lot of them, about 80%, 85% of them do end up in a life skills class eventually. So it's that pathway. It is challenging because there's a limited number of SLPs and there's a limited number of classes. So we still try to support and we can't have unlimited classes, right? Or like they can't go on for years and years and years, because that's not a good model for students either, to get separated from their home schools and to be removed from that environment, which is actually one reason we decided to change the primary language class from a grade 1-2 to just a grade 1 program, so that students aren't out of their home schools for that long and then coming back in an EQAO year. So we still support those students in their home schools. The other students who are not able to access the classes, we still would support them in their home schools as much as we are able to, with good consultation with CERTs, providing programming recommendation reports, providing home activities to parents, providing modeling, right? We're able to go into the class to provide modeling suggestions, activities, recommendations, consultation at SRTs. Certainly we have for students, things like that. So yes, there is a limited, but when we looked at who we can really make quite a bit of difference for and really change their pathway from an LD perspective versus students who might need a longer special education pathway and are going to need to be supported all along their pathway. We decided that would be the students to give that, hopefully give that bump to change their academic pathway for the future. And then the other children who are going to need that longer, more consistent pathway because they either have cognitive challenges or other neurodevelopmental diagnoses, we can support those children in their home schools, in their communities. And obviously we're looking at a bunch of different strategies around autism specifically, or those kind of students. So heavily invested in very passionate in the work of supporting those students as well. But when we look at self-contained programs and the limited availability of what we're able to do, those are the two profiles that we kind of look to support in those classes.
Thank you so much.
Any other questions? Go ahead, Allison.
Yeah, thank you so much for the information that you've given us today. It's been really useful. The question I have is, how many children are being supported through the LLI program? Do you have any kind of numbers? Because obviously there's only, what, 170 students that will get into either an KELP program or an Alpha program, and there are a lot more students with the potential, obviously LD. So the majority of them are being supported in the school. So how many of those students would get support through, say, an LLI program, and what kind of, if this model is working, are there any kind of thoughts about bringing it into a more mainstream teaching of the kindergarten staff, that they can actually deliver this in the homeschools for those that need it?
Yeah, so maybe I'll clarify first that for students that are coming forward through an IPRC for a self-contained class, there is no limit on the number of classes that we have. So we currently have the number of Alpha classes that we have because of the number of students that have come through needing that placement. So there is no cap on placements. But for a program, which KELP is, then because that doesn't meet if you don't have it tonight, we could forward it to SEAC later on.
Yes, thank you. So in terms of the number of students that we're servicing currently, I heard that was one of the questions asked. So we've got 20 LRT teachers who've been deployed out to various schools. Not every school has a learning resource teacher. And some schools actually have one learning resource teacher for the whole year, whereas other schools have a learning resource teacher for half the year, and then that teacher goes to another school for the other half of the year. They generally support each portion of the each cycle. They can support up to about 180 students. So they do each group of LLI students is each group is 3 students, and then they will take up to 3 different groupings of students. And so that basically takes, the large portion of their day. They also support our virtual schools up to 2 periods a day. And that's a little bit of a different scenario, only because they can't continue with the normal LLI model because of the complexities with virtual schools and with the usage of the materials and so on. But what they do in those circumstances is that they support directly using the same strategies that would be beneficial for specific students or groups of students, but that are also good for all students. So that's kind of where we are right now. And then in terms of additional support or rolling anything out further across the system, that would certainly be, Tina and budget dependent, but I'm not sure if I've answered all of your questions, but if I haven't, I'm happy to continue to clarify.
That's great. Thank you very much. Yeah.
And I was just going to piggyback on that and just add that we do, I think the latter part of the question was about using similar strategies in kindergarten or in grade 1, sort of within the classroom. And we do have LLI is used also, not in the exact same structured way in our classrooms, and is promoted by our department too for classroom use. And I don't know if either Lori or Jen want to add anything to that part in terms of in-class use of LLI.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that forward. So one of the roles of the LLI teacher, of the LRT, is to work also with in a coaching capacity with classroom teachers, and that includes some of our kindergarten teachers, and that's been incredible. That's an incredible resource in the school buildings. So those strategies are brought forward. The LRT teachers also support classroom teachers in the use of the LLI materials. So even if you don't have an LRT teacher working directly with students from your classroom, there are many opportunities for those coaching conversations and entry points into the toolkit, and then continued conversation about how the strategies are working, and then some problem solving and brainstorming if it comes to a situation where perhaps more intense intervention is required. But that's also a really great opportunity and resource that extends from kindy through all of the primary grades.
Thanks. I think Margot's next.
Hi, yeah, thank you. So my question was mostly answered because Tina kind of alluded to that. So I know that what Allison was asking was how you are bringing it into the general classroom environment as well as taking the children out. So that was kind of what you were answering, Lori. And my question kind of also might be for Tina as well. We speak about instructional program leaders or IPLs for different subject areas. Do we have instructional program leaders that go in and coach our teachers in the kindergarten and grade 1 as to how to deal or to support them in working with children who are struggling phonologically?
Yeah, thank you. Certainly we do. I mean, in the elementary program department now we have 11 staff members, 10 who are instructional program leaders, teachers, and we have one instructional lead who is a DECE lead who works in conjunction with our 10 IPLs, and she concentrates on kindergarten, obviously, because that is her background. And we do support teachers in schools. We have a referral, process, and we have several people that are designated with kindergarten early years in their portfolio, and so that's how we support. And so it is very, we sit every Friday as a team, look at all of the asks and requests, and then really do some some dispatching, like who's the person that's best for this need and this school and this ask. So we try to be really responsive and in time as much as we can. Although it's a lot for 11 people, but they do a phenomenal job. Here's my opportunity to give some kudos to my team too. But yes, they do.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions at this time before we break into our small groups? Seeing none. Okay, so can you go to the last slide there? Thanks, Jen. So these are the questions that you will be contemplating and discussing in your groups tonight. Lorna, you've got our breakout rooms ready, I see. So we're gonna, if you recall, usually our December meetings, we like to keep a bit shorter. So we're hoping to be done a bit sooner tonight. So we're gonna do 15 minutes in our breakout rooms. We'll check in. If you're ready to come back sooner, we'll come back sooner, but we'll do 15 minutes at the most. I believe that Lorna has sent out invites, access to the docs with these questions. You only need one recorder. If more of you want to contribute to the doc for your group, you can, but you only need one recorder. And we'll come back in 15 minutes. And some of our guests will join those groups as well to be part of those discussions. And away we go. So Lorna, if you could send us off. Oh, I guess everyone has the join at the top of their screen. So if you just click on join, and off you can go to your breakout room.
And everyone.
we will take those away as we have the last number of meetings and either provide answers to those or give you some feedback on what we're going to do with your questions and suggestions and feed that back to you as we have in the last number of meetings. So if I can do a thank you to Tina and Lori and Jen and Christine, thank you all for your presentation tonight, the great information. I think that was really informative, something that we've been talking about and waiting for, and glad we could finally have happen. So thanks for that tonight. And I'll come back to you with all the questions pulled together for you to give some thought to and for us to feedback to the group. Thanks. You guys
Thank you, and thank you all for giving us some time tonight. We appreciate it. And again, thank you to the presentation team for your hard work and for being here with us in the evening. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Good night, everybody.
Great.
Thanks for your.
Thank you.
Yeah. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. We are now moving on with our agenda, and we are at the SEAC discussion and question period.
Sorry,
So,
if I
yeah.
could jump in, if you haven't already, and if you want to, you can go back to your layout and change your layout if you want back to either auto or tiled if you want to be able to see everybody again. Just helping people with the technology. Thanks, Lou.
Okay. Joanna?
Yeah, I just want to revisit something we talked about at the beginning of last year, and actually from the start of the SEAC committee, and that was around making sure that our families and our staff are fully aware of SEAC and the local associations and the resources that we provide or that they provide to students. So we talked about the importance of that communication, and I'm just wondering if you could remind us or tell us where things are at, and particularly in this year where things are so different, and you know, sometimes accessing that information doesn't happen as normally as it would. So over to you, Mark.
Sure, thanks for that question, Joanna. So a reminder, last year we spent some time talking about this, how best to improve communication around SEAC and the SPED plan. So we did a couple things which were great. One was that we created those postcards. Remember those? And I brought them to SEAC for you to see the draft and to get your input on that. And that we actually grew that because initially we just had the SPED plan on there. And then you had the idea, why don't we also have a link to the board website and to SEAC on there as well? So we put both things on that postcard and made sure with schools, we printed thousands of those so that those could go out to every family as they were entering into the problem-solving process and approaching SRT and IPRC, that they had access to that because they had the web links on that postcard. It's one thing we did. Another thing we did was if you go to any of the school websites and scroll down to the bottom, I'm on Abbey Lane's just because it was the first one on the list on the board website. If you scroll down to the bottom of all school websites, they're all the same. There's a blue band at the bottom with 8 different buttons, and every one of those includes the special education button. So when you click on that, it again takes you to the board website, which includes, specifically to the special education portion of the board website, where it includes links to SEAC and to the SPED plan. And then, when you go into SEAC, you get the different associations in there as well. And then finally, we also, and we've got a lot of use out of this, or our families had, we started a few years ago a web app, a board web app that is downloadable onto people's phones. And then families can tailor that to their students' specific school and schools. And on that app, again, there's a button on everyone's home screen on that app. There's a button for special education that takes you to all those things as well. So our families have had, I guess, easier access to SEAC and the SPED plan than they've ever had through our discussions here, ensuring that that access and information is available to them. So that's how we're doing that. Does that answer your question, Joanna?
Yes, it does. And then just thinking about families that are brand new to our school and students who are just starting in their academic career. Once a teacher begins to identify that there might be issues, how would they be connected with this information?
Yeah, the same way. And actually, it reminded me, even before families come to us initially, we have a series of events called Calling All 3-Year-Olds, which we do each fall, winter before the next school year, where we're providing information to families with their students first coming into kindergarten for their first year. That's why it's called Calling All 3-Year-Olds. And in those information events, we always have student services staff there to connect with families about students with special needs and providing information and already making connections. I should say we also do that right away with students coming out of childcare. When we're making those connections, then that those families are coming forward and those community partners are coming forward saying, school board, let's work together to support this student right away because they're coming in with some special needs. So
yeah. That's great because that helps to bridge, I'm thinking particularly about young students who are opted into virtual school. So they never had that one-on-one contact with a teacher even in person, which would delay everything too. So yeah, okay, so hearing about that Calling All 3-Year-Olds event, and that helps to clarify that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Alison?
Yeah, just a quick comment. So it looks great. I just Googled the SEAC page on the website. Just a quick point. Is there any way that you can hyperlink the associations directly to their websites? Because right now it lists all the organizations, but it might be useful if there was just a hyperlink set up so that it would go straight to the organization's websites, just as a comment improvement.
Yeah. If you provide the address that you want linked to for your association, provide that to Lorna. We'll make the link.
Okay.
Sure.
Thank you.
Any other questions before I go into my report?
Well, thank you. Mark, over to you for the a summary of the superintendent's report.
Yeah, thank you. So I've got 3 items there, and I appreciate we've kind of gone long. Usually we have a shorter December meeting, so we've gone a bit long with our staff presentation. Just highlighting again that we did, I brought to you last month about doing the CCAT for our virtual students on Friday, which we did. So sharing that with you. And also the model change. I did share with you back when we first had students opting for the virtual schools back in the beginning of the year. I brought numbers to you then. So I thought I would bring those to you again in my report this month. The numbers haven't changed too much in terms of percentages. With about 25% of our secondary students attending virtually, and about 30% in the elementary. So that there's been a few numbers go a little bit back and forth, but not too much. I guess we've seen a slight rise in the 2 of them. So those numbers are there. And there will be 2 more opportunities for students to change the model in secondary, because we're now in quad 2 for secondary. We still have quad 3 and quad 4 coming. So students can change again those 2 times. And then we have one more change opportunity for elementary, which we're looking at for the beginning of March. So after first term reports have come home. So those are more opportunities coming. And then the last part of my report, as you can see with the thousands of students in the virtual program, I thought we should talk a little bit about what that's looking like. And certainly this has been an area of growth for us as a board. You know, before this, we didn't really, virtual learning was an exception. So we've really grown in how we're doing this, as I mentioned in my report. And so I thought I would share with you. We just had this sent to us last week. This was unsolicited. A parent decided to create a video of her daughter. This is a student in the virtual CPP, Community Pathways program. And this parent made this video of her daughter participating in the virtual classroom and did a voiceover of her daughter, what her daughter's doing during that. So I've got it here. It's only a minute or so long, but I think it's pretty powerful. So I'm going to share my screen with you. So if you want to go back to Spotlight or Sidebar, you can. So you see it larger. And here we go, if you could bear with me. Can you see the video screen? Someone give me a nod.
Yep.
Yeah.
Can.
Okay, I'll go full size and hopefully I've got the volume turned right up. And here we go. Can someone give me a thumbs up when you just let me know you hear the volume?
Hi, I'm Avery.
Yes, we can.
Virtual school, what is working? Well, definitely the interaction, the face-to-face opportunities to connect socially, as well as to practice verbal communication skills, turn-taking, listening, and the basic mechanics of a conversation. They've had lots of opportunities to connect through sharing, show and tell, and telling stories from a personal perspective. The flexibility is also really working for us. Teachers have been excellent at pivoting according to students' interests and abilities. We're loving how they ask the kids what they want to do. So my child feels like she's heard. She has input into the daily curriculum and flow of the class. We also really appreciate the ability to opt out of certain lessons where it makes sense. So maybe doing our daily fitness independently outside or in nature when there are nice days. A great adaptation and source of support has been the class EAs, and specifically the breakout groups. The opportunity to work in smaller groups with more individual support and teaching has been really helpful.
Where is it? The Jamboard.
Overall, we're very impressed with and grateful for this program. The ingenuity and the enthusiasm and patience here is outstanding.
I hope you could hear that okay. Allison, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, obviously that's a wonderful example of how this is working so well for some students. And you know, my daughter is in the virtual school and is thriving in it. I just wondered if there were any thoughts or any, I'm sure there are, but what is the process for assessing what has worked well and what the learnings are from COVID? As to what will be taken into a post-pandemic school board. Obviously, there's some big great things that have been learnt, and you know, quadmesters are working wonderfully for some students. There's some opportunities here to be really innovative in the school system. And I just wondered, what is the process for analysing what's worked to allow us to go forward?
Great question. Thanks, Allison. We talk about this often. What's, you know, what have we learned? What have we, you know, our skills have grown dramatically in the virtual world. You know, a little snapshot of that is look at us here at SEAC. You know, something we weren't doing or maybe fathomed a year ago. But certainly things that we've really grown and become quite skilled at. So some of those things we are sharing with one another constantly in a variety of forums. Some of those we have to evaluate, right, about how effective are they. And you may have come across as, wow, this is really great, but how much did it really impact student learning, right? That's the key question. So those things we are certainly gathering. Our staff have been constantly adding to the resources and ideas that are available to our staff, increasing the technological abilities of our systems and our software to make things more possible that we can do with our students. And then there's lots of, like I said, lots of sharing going on. So that's something we're going to keep asking ourselves is what do we want to hold on to as we go into, I think it's going to be a new normal. I don't think we're going to go back to where we were before. I don't know what that's going to look like, but I think we're going to have some new normals for sure. And we don't want to lose the great things that we've learned from this. So I'd say it's an ongoing process, Allison. But we certainly don't want to lose the great things that our staff are learning to help our students.
Okay, great.
So, and if I could say, I know that this isn't the experience of every one of our students, that the skills of our staff vary. The abilities of our students to participate in the virtual environment really varies, especially some of our students with our most complex needs. So, I'm not, wearing the rose-colored glasses to think that this is what every student is experiencing. I know it's not, and that we need to really make sure we're reaching every student as best we can. Often needing to work really closely with the family on the other end, because they're the ones who are doing the work with their students, right, with their children. So we're very conscious of that as well. So it's a work in progress, but I'll say that I'm very proud of our staff because they're doing some fantastic things with our students. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you for the question, Alison. We are now moving on to item 4.2, which is association reports. If you have a report, please indicate. Oh, I see we have Deirdre and then Alison. Over to you, Deirdre.
Hello. Hi again. Okay, ABC Halton has an association report. ABC Halton sent a letter to Director Miller on November the 16th, which included concerns about the primary gifted program, as well as requests for data and formation of a working group. ABC's concerns have been building as we've seen inappropriate changes to parent information sessions and early identification processes. These changes have resulted in children with gifted special education needs being missed or being denied access to identification. The results of these outcomes is an inequity in how children in the HDSB are being supported. We're already seeing families with greater financial means accessing private testing. When this happens, children from disadvantaged and racialized families will be left out. And in addition, we are observing fewer girls being identified, which is consistent with gender bias when formal process is absent. Children who are gifted are part of a population that is considered neurodiverse. The neurodiverse population is considered to be outside the norm or atypical. This population includes people with autism, ADHD, giftedness, among others. It simply means that their brains work differently. In addition to cognitive differences, children who are gifted also experience asynchronous development socially, emotionally, and physically. This asynchrony increases with higher cognitive capacity. This means for children that while they try to fit into a regular classroom, they often struggle to function, to learn, and to relate to their classmates. We often see higher rates of disengaged students and mental health challenges with these children. ABC is alarmed that the most recent reported results that only 9 children were tested in 2020 and only 1 was identified as gifted. We know this population is much higher, and we are concerned for the students who are being missed. We're asking that data, communication, and training information be provided for review. We're asking that a working group be formed as soon as possible so that we can jointly identify improvements to the nomination and testing processes. And we'll make those changes in order to better support the children, train teacher and CERTs, and to educate our board and administrators across Halton. At this time, the request is with Director Miller, and ABC is awaiting the response. I should also just let you know that every week I probably hear from about 3 or 4 families, and most of them, I'd say about 80%, are directed in respect to the primary gifted program. I'm hearing from families that they're receiving information from schools that programming is being diminished for primary. This is not true, I believe. That's what we're being told from the board, and we believe that. So we're hoping that the messaging can change, and we'd like to work as ABC with the board to help change that messaging and to find a better way to support our learners. Thanks.
Alison, and then Mark.
Okay, thank you. The comments from the Learning Disabilities Association, just to let everybody know, we have a number of programs that are available, subsidized programs that are running for students with learning disabilities and or ADHD. We have a literacy program that's available, social skills, self-advocacy, and we will be launching in January a brand new math intervention program for students with learning disabilities who have gaps in their numeracy and number sense, that will be available with the support of pandemic funding from our community. So just want to make sure that staff and other associations know that if there are learners struggling with maths, we have supports that will be coming out to assist them in the new year.
Thank you, Alison. Mark?
Yeah, I didn't put my hand up, Lucille. This is just,
Oh.
yeah, sorry, because this is just association reports, right?
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
Okay. Are there any more association reports? If not, then I will move on to the trustee report.
Okay, good evening. So I will present the trustee update to SEAC. And I have an update drafted that I will share with Lorna for the purposes of our minutes. So I'll just quickly go through some key points. So lots going on, as always. At the November board meetings, trustees were presented with the indoor air quality report and annual water testing quality reports. These to identify schools where there may be ventilation, filtration, or water quality issues respective. So the water issue would be lead exceedances, and the reports identify where such deficits might exist and how they've been corrected. There was also a financial update report, and the big news here is that the minister has recently announced that the ministry will not be clawing back funds originally allocated through the grants for student needs. There was a great concern at HCSB and across the province that boards would be penalized for the discrepancy between projections of the number of students enrolled and the actual students that attend the schools. For example, some families might have chosen homeschooling, or kindergarten students remain at home to delay entry as a result of the pandemic. Our Student Senate continues to meet on a monthly basis by video conference. There's always great turnout with a great representation from both elementary and secondary schools. And for those interested in hearing about HDSB's pandemic response as it relates to our schools, Dr. Megani, who's the Medical Officer of Health for Halton Region, presented at the board's November 4th meeting. So anyone interested in listening to this presentation will be able to find the video on our hcsb.ca website under the November 4th board meetings. Tomorrow, trustees will receive the presentation about the new Human Rights, Equity, Action, and Accountability Plan, the way forward. SEAC had seen this presentation at our November 3rd meeting, if you recall, with Superintendent Etov. And finally, there's some other items of interest coming up at tomorrow's board meeting, which include director's goals for the coming year, as well as a number of policies and procedures that require approval, among them the Safe Schools policy. And that's it for me. On behalf of the trustees, thank you.
Thank you, Joanna. The next item is committee reports, and I would ask that the SEAC rep who is on the committee, maybe if there are any updates. Oh, I see Margot's hand there. Margot, over to you.
Oops, there you go. Hi. So I'm the SEAC rep as well as the trustee for the Nelson Bateman Integration Committee. So I do have an update on that, but I don't know if there's anybody from PIC or accessibility that wanted to go first because they're on the list ahead of me. No, we're good to go. Okay, so we had a meeting on November the 24th, which was the first time in a while. The students talked about the integration between Bateman and Nelson because Bateman now all the students are going to Nelson. Students have said it has been difficult with COVID, but they also recognize that regardless of what school that you're at, COVID has made any situation difficult. They also see some positives to it just because the social interactions haven't had to be quite so quick happening. So there were positives and negatives to how COVID has impacted the integration. The Community Pathways Program, or CPP, is attending Nelson every day. There was a question as to whether they have representation on student council. And at that moment in time, they had asked two students to be involved. They at the time weren't comfortable, but they're going to continue to look into that matter and see if they can get representation from the CPP classrooms. They're looking at ways to try to honor Robert Bateman within the Nelson community at the school. So they were looking for suggestions from the committee as to what they could do. So if you recall from when Pearson and MM Robinson amalgamated, the auditorium at MM is now called the Lester B. Pearson, if I'm right. Somebody help me. The entranceway is related to Lester B. Pearson. So they're trying to find some way to honor Robert Bateman's name at Nelson. There already is quite a bit of influence there. There is a big picture of Robert Bateman's, so they're just trying to continue that legacy. The students also spoke of, oh, thank you, the Lester B. Pearson Community Theater. I knew, Rebecca, you would know the answer to that question. All right, so they're also, the students were really excited about an art installation that has been put up outside of Nelson, which is showing how they are trying to bring the two schools together. And we're going to show you the little video of it. If I can find it. Let's see. Yep. Share. So this is the art installation. Tell me if you can see it. Oh, here we go.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, so I will press play. So it's quite nice because it has both the Nelson N and the RBHS emblems that combine to create the sign better together. So that has created quite a bit of buzz for the students in the amalgamation process. And I think that's the end of my report.
Thank you, Margot. Alison?
Yeah, so speaking for the Central and Bateman amalgamation. So the final meeting took place November 23rd. Basically, the amalgamation of the IB program into Central has gone well. Obviously, there has been the challenges of COVID, which has made, as Margot said, made it, amalgamation and integration difficult for many students. But the student body felt that the process had gone as well as possible. And the students are excited about the opportunities. A number of new clubs have opened up with the influence of the students from Bateman. They're excited about new projects that they've got going on together. And basically, there will continue to be reporting on how the process is going, but the formal integration committee has now finished.
Thank you, Alison. I don't think there are any more updates at this time, so I will move on to the next item, which is basically the next agenda, and if anybody has any new items that the committee would like to add to our future agenda. Okay, I don't see anybody.
Sorry, Lucille. It
Yeah.
says item 5 is SEAC chair and vice chair elections.
Yes, that's the next item. So I was just asking if there were anything for the next agenda, but I will move right along and I will pass the gavel on to Mark and let him outline the election process. Mark, over to you.
Thanks, Lou. So we're as we have in years past, we're going to follow the same board bylaw that governs elections of the chair and the vice chair of the board. We will follow the same process here. So just as a reminder to everyone that so everyone will have the opportunity to say whether or not you're interested for the position of chair. We'll do that first. Certainly no expectation or pressure on anyone's part, but if people are interested, you're certainly welcome to put your name forward. Obviously, we can't do our past process where you would have an actual ballot where you'd be able to write the person's name on and then put it in a box. Instead, we will do that electronically. Lorna will, if we have an election, I only say that because I think only once or twice in my time in this role have we had an election. Most of the time it's been acclaimed. So if we have an election tonight, Lorna will send you a link to a ballot where you will type in the person's name, click send. It only goes to Lorna and I, and we will see who gets those votes. And at no time will anyone know how many votes somebody got. We won't disclose that. So please don't worry about that. And if we have a number of candidates and we don't have one candidate getting the majority of the votes, which I believe is 5, I think we're at 8 voting members right now tonight. We'll confirm that. If we don't have a majority for one candidate, then we will work through a runoff process, and I'll describe that if we get to that. But I haven't had that happen before, so I don't think we should spend our time talking about that if it's unnecessary. So that's how the process will work. And so at this time, I will open the floor to anyone who is a SEAC member. So you can't be an alternate. You have to be a member. So that's the 3 members at large, which I believe we have 2 present tonight, James and Lou, and the association reps and the 2 trustee reps are all eligible to run for chair. So I open the floor to anyone to put their name forward for chair. According to the bylaws, you can also nominate or speak to someone being chair as well. If you, I see Margot's hand up.
I was wondering if it was okay if I nominated somebody.
The bylaws say you can. Whether or not they want to or not, I don't know. But
okay, I'd like to nominate Alison Brindle, please.
okay, Alison,
will you accept my nomination?
Thank you very much for your nomination, Margot. I will accept.
okay, thanks. Anyone else would like to put their name forward or nominate someone else? And if you're nominated, you don't have to accept the person's nomination. So, Margot, is your hand up again, or is that still up from before? Okay.
A latency hand.
Okay. Anyone else interested in putting their name forward to be chair? Going once. Going twice. And Alison, you've accepted the nomination, so you are claimed as our new SEAC chair for the next year. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Look forward to it.
Great. So the bylaw says I now hand the gavel to you, and you now run the same process for vice chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Mark. Moving forward at this stage, would anybody be willing to stand or to nominate somebody else to act as vice chair for the coming session?
I would like to put my name forward as vice chair.
Okay, thank you, Lucille. Joanna, did you have your hand up?
No, I was just going to nominate Lucille Morris, actually.
Great.
Thanks, Joanne.
Would anybody else like to put their name forward or nominate somebody? Okay, I can't see any other nominations at this time. At which point I would like to acclaim Lucille to the position of Vice Chair of SEAC for the coming session. Thank you. Well done, Lucille.
Thank you.
Okay, so Mark, who needs to finish the meeting?
Point of order.
Yeah.
I'd like to make a motion for the scrutineers to destroy all electronic ballots and any records of these ballots effective immediately.
Okay, that is in the bylaw as well. However, there were no ballots, so. But thanks, Joanna.
Right.
If I could, before you adjourn the meeting, Alison, if I could express my appreciation to Lucille and Joanna as chair and vice chair for the last couple of years. You've done a great job. Thank you both for drawing, our team together, help steering the topics and things that we needed to discuss and wrestle with as a committee. I felt very supported by SEAC in the work that we do in supporting our students with special needs. I've really valued the voices of SEAC members, helping inform our actions and decisions in student services. That's been very helpful for us. And I know the trustees have valued your input and support of the direction that we've taken as a board as well. That doesn't mean that all the time that you've agreed or said, you're doing everything perfectly. We've heard that as well, that there's things that we need to get better at. And that feedback has been very important also. So thank you to all of SEAC for that. And thank you for Joanna and Lou for helping guide our committee for the last few years. Thank you.
Thank you. And I really look forward to working with you, Alison. And Joanna, my heart is broken. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
Great. Okay. Well, with that taken care of, I think the only job of from this evening for me is to adjourn the meeting at 9:07 and to wish everybody all the best of the season, and look forward to meeting everybody in the new year on, I think it's January the 5th at 7 o'clock. For our first SEAC of 2021, which will hopefully be a little bit smoother than 2020 has been. So have a wonderful holiday, and we'll